Welcome to the Sens Spotlight podcast brought to you by the Sick Podcast Network. Before we get started, bet the beauties with Betway and scan the QR code on the screen or click on the link in the detail section to create an account and download the app. Must be 19 plus. Please play responsibly. Betway is an official sponsor of your Ottawa Senators. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe to the show, especially hit the subscribe button on YouTube. It really helps the show out. And we do not have Pierre McGuire on today because he has some other things to do, but we have Graeme Nichols, my buddy, who I absolutely adore, and we should have a fun podcast just talking about the game last night and maybe Pinto's contract and more fun stuff. So it should be a fun podcast, and hit it.
Turn up your volume. Because you're about to listen to the Sick Podcast. Send Spotlight.
Here's Alfredson, bursts the speed, gets a shot away, score! Daniel Alfredson ends the game in overtime and sends the Ottawa Senators to the Stanley Cup Final for the first time in franchise history.
The sickest Ottawa Senators podcast. It's gonna be sick.
And we're joined by Graeme Nichols. I know I just saw you about 12 hours ago in the press box, but thanks so much for coming.
It's been a minute. Yeah, no worries. It's been a minute, man. What's going on? What's changed in the last 12 hours?
A lot. No, I'm kidding. We'll see about some injury updates. I think that's maybe the next thing we'll find about Chabot and Jensen. But what did you just think of last night's game in terms of how the Senators played against Boston and finding a way to win that game?
I hate using the word character win, but it's like there's been many instances this year where it's like Ottawa plays well in the first period. They allow the opponent to claw back, find a way, claw back into the game, and then they just find a way to persevere and get that goal. And I think, like I mentioned to you, like we sit beside each other in the press box, and I mentioned to you with like 8-10 minutes left in the game, I'm like, man, it looks like they're just content just to ride it out, play for a point, try and survive, and see what happens in OT. But they found a way. They willed, and they found a way. And, just a character win, and then Timmy iced it. So it was a fun game to watch. It was a fun game to be at, entertaining. And it's just if they found a way to win, and I'm really happy for the team.
My dad was at the game last night with a buddy, and we drove home after the game, and him and my dad were just like buzzing. They're like, that was amazing. What a game. They found a way to win, and just how up and down that game was. But I think you're right. And you saw the way, I don't know, did you watch what the Senators put out of Travis Green to the room after the game last night? And he's like, I'm so proud of you guys. Like, why do you think I love this game as being like almost the most important win of the season so far? And Nick Cousins, I think, just said like, because we battled or something like that, but which was very funny. Just someone had to speak in that video. People should check it out. But I think what this team's learning is almost that muscle to bend but not break, right? They have points in 11 of 12, and
I think it's a resiliency that goes back to last season, right? It's just, down the stretch last year, getting into the postseason for the first time, being 3-0 against the Leafs, working their way back, having an opportunity to potentially push it to Game 7. Ultimately, obviously, that didn't happen. But I think like resiliency is one of the key characteristics of this group. Like there's not a lot of panic in the sense that if they're down a goal or two, like they can find a way to work themselves back, and they know that. It's just they have their structure, they have their system. I think it took a while to get to that early on in the first stretch of the season and the games, but it seems like they're kind of back to that identity now. I think they found it a little bit. They're working hard at both ends of the rink, and they're finally starting to see the results.
Yeah, for sure. And what I really like is just it feels like in every game they're right there, right? And it's obviously you'd like them to win games 5-1, 5-2 a bit more often than they have been the past stretch. Like it's crazy. It doesn't feel like it, but they've have points in 11 of their last 12 games. And that's a testament to just finding ways to pick up points. And what's scary to me in a good way is that when Tkachuk comes back, hopefully, knock on wood, they don't get more injuries. Nick Jensen went down. Chabot might be out for a couple weeks. Obviously, those are big players on the team, but just the fact of the matter is they're in a really good spot, and maybe their most important player and their captain has been out for all but 3 games thus far, and they have a winning record. They're tied for the most points in the Atlantic. Like, they're in a really good spot, and you can see how it's going to get better. Obviously, they have a tough road trip coming up, and if they can survive that, you really think, okay, this team's like right where they want. And I will just say, I picked the Senators to win the Atlantic Division, and let's just say I'm feeling a bit better about my pick. So
We're not even 20 games in, Alex. Come on, man.
I no, but I'm just saying. I'm not saying they're going to win the Atlantic. I picked them.
This could be like your Linus Ullmark is having a shutout right now, and then everyone's going to get mad at you.
Unfortunately, we haven't had that opportunity this year in the regular season.
You're that guy. You're the jinx guy.
I am not the jinx guy. I think Julian did that to someone recently. Julian McKenzie. He jinxed some player. I think it was Allmark actually. But anyways, that's a side note. I'm not the jinxer. Just for everyone to know, that's Julian McKenzie. But
he's going to appreciate that.
I'm going to send the clip. Cut it. But what did you think? We were in the press box, and the one. Mm-hmm.
So, like, the one thing I'll say is, like, we had this conversation when Brady went down. It's like, okay, like, what do you think is the best case scenario for this team? And you're like, well, if they play 500 hockey, if they're in the mix for the postseason, that's ideally where you want to be. You just want to be in the mix. And I think it felt reasonable at the time to say 500 should be the goal, because, you know, you lose a guy who scores like 30, 35 goals a year, 70 points, essentially a lock for those numbers if he's healthy. Losing that, there was a quality of depth on the left side, whether you look at like Perron, Gregg, Zetterlund. Obviously, that's not the way it's shaken out right now. Like, they're mixing and matching. That's playing their offsides. Like Michael Amadio is playing his offside with Pinto and Giroux. But I thought one of the strengths that we talked about with this team early on was like that quality of depth, and that's playing its role right now. Whether it's like a Nick Cousins who's playing a handful of games on the top line, whether it's David Perron who's there now, it's like Travis Green's done an exceptional job of finding guys who can produce in small sample sizes. As soon as it starts going, I wouldn't say south, but as soon as there are those moments where they're not productive, it's like, okay, we'll try the next guy, next man up. And for whatever reasons, it's clicking. And I think like having these small sample sizes where like Nick Cousins isn't necessarily a first line player. You don't want to play on the first line all year, but in a 2, 3, 4, 5 game sample, if he's productive and he's doing the things that he does well, which is like winning battles, engaging with the opposition, winning those one-on-one battles to create more time and space for the more skilled guys on his line and help distribute and sustain zone time for that line, that's exceptional. That's what you want. And David Perron has many of those same skill sets, and he probably has a way more offensive aptitude than Nick Cousins. And to this point, it's worked really well for that line. And that's like getting that kind of production from those guys is what's going to help keep this team afloat until Brady gets back, which apparently might be in 2 weeks. But it's encouraging. And like you talk about, you know, having a good winning record in November. Hopefully we never have to talk about those November swoons ever again, right? So that's like the other side, but that's the other side benefit of this stretch of games that the Senators are having. But they've really put themselves in a good spot. They're dealing with some injuries now. You mentioned one to Nick Jensen last night. Jake Sanderson also took a shot off his hand or wrist last night as well, and he missed some
that stretch of like 15 minutes where it was like Zetterlund went down, Perron went down, Sanderson went down, Jensen went out. I'm like, is this game just going to be like?
It was like every time Boston took a shot, it just hit a Senator and they're down. You're like, oh god, it's just a war of attrition at that point. But credit to them, they won. So.
But what you mentioned, though, is just the way they've been playing and almost learning how to win, right? And what I find interesting is if you take out their first, 20, 25 games of last year, when they went on that heater in late November, early December, they were, a top 10, top 9 team in the league in terms of points percentage. Like almost once they learned how to –
I think it was like top 5 or maybe even top 3.
We need to go back. But my point being is – they learn how to win, and you're seeing that right now as a fruits of their labor in terms of having that muscle. And think about when this team has Brady back, they could easily be a much better, like they're going to be a better team, no doubt. Mm-hmm. And you see where they are in the standings. Like you felt like they were playing defense with Tkachuk out, but if they're, top 2, top 3 in the Atlantic, a point or two away from the top of the division, and Brady comes in, then you're, as Graeme Nichols always says, you're laughing, right? Like you're in a really good place, right? And I just think this team, if it can still find ways to muster points, to play pretty good hockey. They have lulls in games, which is always something that I wish the lulls were like 50% shorter. That's the one thing where it just feels like it's like, okay, that's a bit too long. And obviously, as Travis Green always says, and it's a fair point, like the opponent has a say in the game too, right?
Yeah.
But they've been really good at just finding ways to play well, to get points. And I think with Tkachuk back, and we'll see how soon it is, like this team could not just be good, it could be close to great. And I think the Atlantic Division's wide open. And right now I think if they can get to the end of this road trip upcoming for 7 games where they go to LA, San Jose, if they're in a good spot after that, they're going to be really feeling good about themselves.
But to your point, I think that has to be the encouraging thing for Senators fans, right? Like this team is having really good stretches of 5-on-5 hockey. They're doing a lot of things right, but you look at some of the other like peripheral numbers, whether it's the penalty kill or it's the goaltending, you're like, okay, like Linus Ullmark's save percentage isn't anywhere remotely close to his career norm. So if like that regresses to his career norms, this team theoretically should be even better than what they're performing at right now. So it's like, if you look at their penalty kill, same thing. Like they just switch their formation. They've switched from diamond structure to a box. We'll see how that works out over the long term. But if some of these like bad stats, whether it's the PK or the save percentage, start trending back up, and the team continues to play well at 5-on-5, they get a Brady Tkachuk back, I think like there are a lot of encouraging signs to say, hey, this team isn't just good now, but it's something that they can sustain and build upon and get even better and push themselves towards like the top 3 in the Atlantic, which you talked about.
And I think there's no coincidence that their PK has been slightly better with the box, but also just has been better the last 11, 12 games. They've got more saves at a higher clip. And guess what? They have points in 11 of 12 games. It's not like their PK has been phenomenal or the goaltending's been phenomenal, but it's been good enough and they're finding ways to win, right? And it's like at the beginning of the season, it felt like, okay, the PK could just be half decent, and if they could just get half decent goaltending, they'd be really good. And we've seen that in the last 12 games for the most part, not elite, but just good enough. And look where the team's at. The one player that we were talking about, and I think he deserves a shout out, is just Fabian Zetterlund last night, because it felt like that first period was the best period of his tenure as a Senator. I just felt he was super lively, creating chances with Cousins and Ridley Gregg, and obviously set up Cousins for that goal. How promising do you think that game can be for a guy like Zetterlund that's really been struggling and has the big contract as well?
I think you hit the nail on the head. I think for me, one of the things that Zetterlund's always done well is he creates shots for himself. Like he's more than happy just to rip it. Last year, you go back to the time he was acquired at the trade deadline, his shot rate, his expected goal rate, it was one of the highest on the teams, just trailing only like Brady Tkachuk. So you're like, okay, I know he wasn't scoring last season, but if he sustains those rates, in theory, he should be scoring way more than he is right now. It's just whether you want to attribute it to bad luck, just finding the goalie. Maybe you should aim for the goalie and he'll start hitting the corners. But I don't know what you want to attribute it to. But like people will look at his rates and everything else, low shooting percentage, and say, "Oh, he's totally unlucky. If he does the same things, good things will happen this year." And like I think this year he wasn't getting the same shot volume. Those rates had suffered, and even going back to his time last year, I think if you looked at his overall play, even though he was creating shots, getting in locations, ripping it whenever the puck came his way, I don't think he was doing enough off the puck to sustain zone time, create opportunities for his line mates. It felt like he was almost like a one and done player, where it's like a shot would manifest and then either the goalie saves it, gets a whistle, or the puck goes back the other way, and then the other team gets their turn at it to trade chances. So I think the encouraging thing about last night's game, and we reflected on this in the press box, was like he was working hard to create, whether it's a loose puck battle, one-on-one battle along the wall, hitting the opposition to try and separate them from the puck. Like he was working his ass off to try and recover pucks for his line mates, and it manifested with the Dylan Cousins goal, where it's like he got the puck behind the net, throws it out front, boom, one-timer in the back of the net. Like that's the way he needs to play. And I don't know if he's unlocked the secret of how to have success with this team right now. But if he's a player that they're expecting a lot from for secondary scoring, right? Like they signed him to a new contract, $4.3 million. they're paying him quite a bit of money to be productive, and to this point, that hasn't been happening consistently. But if he can get back and start channeling the energy and that just that's the way he has to play every night if he's going to be a successful player in this league. And if that manifests over the long term, I think Ottawa's in great shape.
That was exactly what I was going to say. If he can do that consistently, right, this team looks a whole lot deeper, a whole lot more talented, and you feel like the whole Steve Staios needs to maybe address at the trade deadline, become a bit smaller in terms of like, okay, we want to just bring in another player that's impactful, but we don't need to bring in two guys, right? If he can be a top 9 player, I think right now, I think the top 6 player that I think Steve Staios and management wanted to bring in terms of with Zetterlund, that's probably not who he is. I think he can do that in spurts, but I don't know if he's going to solidify himself. Maybe, who knows? Maybe if he plays like he did against Boston, I think his only goal of the season is against Boston. So maybe it's just playing against the Boston Bruins at home. But if he can sustain that, that's a really good sign. But I'm not sold that he is the solution in the top 6. And I mean, he has 4 points or 5 points this year in 18 games. Like, that's just not enough. And at the same time, he's playing better. I felt like the last couple of games, he's been much more noticeable. As you mentioned, off the puck, just creating plays, much better in the cycle, just better in transition, decently defensively. Like, he's not a complete liability. It's just, you see a little bit more of the promise and why Steve Staios went out to acquire him. So I take a lot from that. And another guy that it seems like is kind of up and down a little bit, but played really well last night was Dylan Cousins. And, you know, when it felt like when the power play wasn't rolling, what were they, 0 for 19, you could see him be a bit quieter. But last night, the power play gets that goal. He sets part of that great play by Stützle to Giroux. And then as that game progressed, you could really notice him more. And I think he's, again, it's like, it's all these players that Staios has brought in that really feel like the litmus test for this team. If they play well, the Senators are going to be great. If they don't play so well, if they're struggling, the Senators are probably going to do the same.
That was kind of like, and I mentioned this offhand to you last night. It's kind of weird. Like, Staios was praised last season for acquiring these guys as like being good fits. You know, and they're not necessarily the splashiest guys, but you're not paying them like an exorbitant opportunity cost to acquire them either. So like, you talk, and you look at like the pieces that he acquired, like Ullmark, Cousins, Jensen, Zetterlund, Spence, who was in and out of the lineup. Like, a lot of the guys that Steve acquired haven't been playing good hockey this year. You know, through, like, I think with Jensen, at least, like, you can explain it through injury and his recovery from a major surgery. But with the other guys, it's like at 5-on-5, they're just not playing at a high level right now. And Ullmark hasn't been making the saves that he's needed to make as like the number one goalie who's being paid like $8.25. So I was kind of wondering, like, I've never asked him in a scrum this season, but it's like, you know, how do you reflecting on the guys that you acquired? Like, are you disappointed that they're not playing at the same level that you expected when you acquired them? But I think some of these guys are starting to play better, whether it's Ullmark. I thought Nick Jensen's game against Dallas was his best of the season. Unfortunately, he got hurt last night. But like, if Jensen can start playing well, if Ullmark starts playing well, if Cousins starts playing well at 5-on-5, I think like there are a lot of Dylan. Nick's playing fine at 5-on-5, but like Dylan. The one thing I'll say about Cousins, though, is like that line of really Greg, who I think has underperformed to this point in the season. I think like Dylan Cousins at 5-on-5, even though it's like he is producing, he's getting a lot of points on the power play. He's his one-timer's a weapon. Actually, he's not that dissimilar to what Josh Norris was doing, right? Like the 5-on-5 numbers
a little bit,
but he's finishing plays with his one-timer, and you're like, okay, that's productive, that's good. But if he can start bringing a bit more consistently at 5-on-5, and then that line of Greg, Cousins, and Zetterlund, they're like 300 performers to this point of the season. Like they're finding some chemistry together, which I find really, really interesting.
And really interesting when Tkachuk comes back. That's the other thing. But it's funny. I did ask Steve Staios basically, like, how do you make sense of the fact that the guys that you brought in have underperformed? And he immediately went to Zetterlund, which I thought was a really interesting thing, and saying, you know, we feel like he's playing the right way, he's doing the right things, and he's going to be rewarded. I think he has to say that, right? Like, he's not going to shit on his own players, right?
No,
like,
and like,
especially Steve Staios, who is does not want like a mic drop at all. He's the reverse. He wants
everything's close to the chest. He's never going to say speak ill of this team. Yeah.
Um, but the one thing, and I wrote about it at sportsnet.ca, is just the Pinto deal. We should talk about it because that's an interesting deal. I think we are maybe a bit different on the deal. I think we're both in the same realm of how we believe in it, but I think you're a bit lower on it. I'm maybe a bit higher on it. But what was your initial takes on Shane Pinto signing a 4-year, 7.5 A?
Well, give me what you think. Give me what you think, and I'll see if see how it does.
I think the fact that he signed for 4 years, I think 7.5 AAV was going to be 7, 8 in that vicinity if it was a 7-year deal, if it was a 3-4 year deal. So the AAV doesn't get me perturbed. I'm not like, oh my God, that's an overpay or that's an underpay. I feel like that's pretty much market value.
Yep.
Some places would tell you otherwise. I think 4 years, I think the fact of the matter is he did not want to sign an 8-year deal. I don't think it's because of Ottawa necessarily, because he's signed through his UFA years. I think it's because, as he literally said, when I think I asked him or someone asked him, it was like, why did you decide on 4? He's like, well, I'm going to be 29 in 4 years from now, and he'll be able to re-up and get another big contract. And the way he's playing, who knows? Like, to me, he's the Ottawa's second most important center. You could argue most important center in many ways. And he's driving a line with Giroux and Mamadou that's been unbelievable on the third line. Basically, Ottawa's second most important line. He's only gotten better. He's improved on his points, goals, career highs the past couple of years. Like, every year he gets a bit better. This year he's on pace for 40. I don't think that's going to stay. But my point being is he's turned himself into an unbelievable player. And I get why he wants to bet on himself. And if you're the Senators and a player is saying, hey, no matter what you do, I'm gonna give you a couple of years of my UFA, but I'm not going to sign a long-term deal because I want to bet on myself. There's nothing the Senators can do, and that's the way it is. And I'd still rather have Shane Pinto on my team for 7.5 for 4 years, which is essentially 5 years, including this year, at a pretty reasonable rate. It doesn't hamstring you in the cap. I just think it's a good deal. It's a win-win for both teams. The Senators keep their guy who's really important. Would they want it to be longer? Sure. But at the same time, he's with the Sens. He's with the team until Tkachuk's contract in 2028, right? So they got. I think that 4th year is interesting too. That Friedge mentioned, like, oh, he might go 3 years to match up with Tkachuk, or maybe it was 2. But anyways, he went a bit longer. So all in all, I just think it made a lot of sense for both sides, and I think it's a pretty good deal. I think Pinto probably won it more than the Senators, but I don't think the Senators are in a bad place because they signed it, if that makes sense.
No, not at all. I think selfishly for Senators fans, I think they want those long-term deals because, I think you hit the nail on the head. I think like 7.5 is market value for Shane Pinto right now. And I think for a guy who hasn't necessarily posted great offensive numbers to this stage of his career, I think that's where maybe there could be a certain level of concern, but I'll come back to his offensive production in a second. But like 7.5, I think Ottawa paid market value right now. I think selfishly you want those long-term deals because when you're making 7.5 now, even though that might be market value, years 6, 7, 8 of the deal, like that's going to be below market value. And that's where it creates opportunities for success where you can reallocate more money down the road to the rest of your roster to make it better. So I think that's when you want those long-term deals. And I think historically, if you look at Ottawa's core, Pinto's the first that they haven't signed long-term to a big long-term extension. So that it's not a red flag, but I'd say it's an inconvenience. It's just you want those very good players to be part of your organization for a long time. And I kind of look at Pinto in the same realm that I would look at like a Ryan O'Reilly when he was with Colorado, where he's not the number one guy, but he's an extremely valuable center who plays behind, I think it was like Matt Duchene at the time in Colorado when he was there. And it's like those guys have incredible, exceptional two-way value where they take the hard matchups. They're productive. And, you talk to like the Michael Amados, you talk to Closure, you talk to Shane Pinto about being like that line that's not only expected to match up against the opposition best players, but that trio is tilting the ice in the Senators' favor against the opposition's best players. They're scoring and being productive, and it looks like they're having a hell of a lot of fun and rising to the challenge every night. So Shane Pinto, I think you hit the nail on the head too, where it's like this contract walks him to the age of 29, buys out the first 2 years of free agency, yes, but he'll be in a position when at 29 where he's still a relatively young, unrestricted free agent, and because of his role, his usage, his ability to like play tough minutes against the opposition's best forwards and be productive, he's going to have a lineup of teams calling to bring him into the fold if he ever hits free agency. But I think to the Senators' credit, they signed him. He's here for 4 years. That's great. They avoided a bridge deal. But I think agents are also wisening up to the fact that if you take short-term deals, you're just going to get another big contract down the road. With the exception of like injuries and everything else. I know everyone talks about it and praises like financial security and everything else, but it's like it's very rare that a player will take an expensive deal now and short-term it, it's very rare that a player would take a short-term deal and like lose money down the road like that because of inflation, the cap rising and everything else. Like I think like the only exceptions you'll find are who's the failed prospect who went from Detroit to San Jose? The guy.
Zadina.
Yeah, like Philip Zadina left money on the table to go bet on himself, goes to San Jose, and then didn't work out for him, and now he's pretty much out of the NHL, right? So very rare. Very rare.
And also in Pinto's case, it's like you still have $30 million. You signed just, I think it was 3.7 or 5, if I'm not mistaken. I have to double check, but you've already basically accumulated over $40 million. Okay, I'm gonna bet on myself because I could maybe get another 40 million, but I already have 40 freaking $million. I'm okay for the rest of my life, right?
Oh, for sure.
I think that's the interesting thing with the cap rising. I was just gonna say.
In 4 years, Alex, like that 30 million, that extra 30 million maybe that you left on the table now, like that could be 50 million in 5 years, right? So
sure. And I think that's the thing that agents are realizing, especially with the cap rising so dramatically, is if I sign a long-term deal, I'm really losing money if my player continues to produce, right? Like think about even, I think everyone in Sensland is so happy that Jake Sanderson and Tim Stützle signed their 8-year deals. But from an agent's perspective, that was malpractice.
Well, same with Drake Batherson. I think Drake Batherson's like the perfect example where it's like a guy had a good, like, what's he making? 4.75, I think. And he's
4.9. It's 4.9.
So like a year after this, and then he's a free agent. And like he's set himself up well to cash in. So that'll be like the first contract where. So I don't know how you view it, but like the way I look at Ottawa's roster, that's window of competitiveness. I think it's like you get these guys on their contracts now. It's like when these extensions start kicking in, like the next contracts, that might be when the cycle might be. It's going to be a closed window kind of situation where it's like you better have iced your best teams because it's going to get that much harder to win when everybody's making way more money on their second deal.
And I think the Pinto, and I wrote about this, I think the Pinto contract tells us that the window is right now. It is not in 3 years. It's not, I think in 2 years, sure. But like it's Brady Tkachuk's contract. Like the next 3 years is the years for the Senators to win. I think next year is the year where they're going to go really all in. They'll have their pick unless they trade it, but they'll have more assets, in the cupboards. They'll have a couple more prospects that hopefully come to fruition in terms of just being players that they can tangibly trade if they need to be, right? Like Yakimchuk, Hensler, maybe Montgomery turns into something, et cetera, right? But I think next year is the year for the Senators to go all in terms of feeling. They're probably not going to win the cup, but I think next year they'll have a chance where you can say, hey, if things go right, Florida, great team, but they're getting older. Tampa Bay is falling off. Look at the Canadians are a fun story, but I don't know if they're at that ceiling yet. You look at Toronto's just a complete mess. I don't think their future's bright. Like you can see where, okay, we get to the conference finals and then you get to the conference finals. Look at the Sens in 2017. They were not the best team, but they were literally one shot away from making the finals because of their pathway to the conference finals. So my point being is I think this team is really good. They're probably going to make the playoffs again. Maybe they win a round, maybe they win 2. And then you go into next year and say, hey, they've had the playoff experience, et cetera. But I think you're right that, Pinto's extension and Batherson up in a year from now, it's not. This isn't going to be the case forever unless they all re-up. I think Kachuk is the one guy. If he re-ups, you almost feel like it's like, okay, if it's a 3-4 year deal, maybe it's more, maybe it's less. But if he resigns, then that completely changes the dynamic of this window. But for right now, it's 3 years, in my opinion. And I still think they're going to be a really good team. I think they're a really good team this year. I think they will be next year. And Shane Pinto being as part of it is only going to make them better.
And I think the interesting part about the contract as well is like all of Ottawa's contracts, whether it's like starts with Brady in 28, then you have Shabbat 29, then you have Cousins and Pinto in 2030. I think it's Sandy's 2032, and I think Timmy's 2031. Like they're all staggered. So like you're not, I know Cousins and Pinto are both centers and they're both relatively young. So like that's a weird kind of dynamic to it where you have your two centers up, two important centers up at the same time, but the contracts are all staggered, which I found like very interesting, very strategic. Not too many big decisions have to be made at the same time unless you sign a guy like a year earlier kind of thing for an extension. But that's just an interesting wrinkle that I thought was kind of neat. But I think there's a lot of pressure on Steve Staios right now. Like you talk about this window, this 4-year window, 5-year window, whatever you want to call it. But there's gonna be a lot of pressure on him to insulate this core with like the right pieces, better fits, and like he hasn't. I'd say like Linus Ullmark was probably a big swing. That's probably the biggest swing he's made as a general manager.
And the Cousins trade.
I think the Cousins trade was more of a shock factor where you're actually trading like a beloved player within that dressing room with Josh Norris. I think there's like a little bit of like shock factor to that as opposed to like Josh Norris and Dylan Cousins are good players, but they're not top tier guys. Like he's not taking a big swing on a superstar player and trying to bring him into the fold and get him extended. But it feels like we're certainly building for one of those moments. I think just the key for me is like you mentioned, it's like how do you accrue the assets or how do you get the pieces to take a big swing and kind of go for it.
The one thing that I think I was talking to you about this before, but like off camera, but if Dylan Cousins starts playing well, if Fabian Zetterlund starts playing well, if Ridley Gregg becomes a better player, I think this team's pathway to make a huge trade that's like Allmark, but for a forward or maybe for a defenseman is you're making a hockey trade. You might trade a first-round pick, but it's like I'm giving you good NHL players or very important NHL players, and you're giving me back a superstar. Right. And I'm going to give you some assets. And that's their leverage is like, hey, like we might not have a dearth of picks, but we have proven players that will help your team. Like I think about like the Pierre-Luc Dubois trade. It didn't work out for the Kings, but that type of trade where it's like, okay, we're giving you Velarde, Iafallo, a second round pick. It's like those two players are really good players, right?
Your Winnipeg Jets bias is showing.
Well, I was also thinking of it's true. It's true. I can't lie. Or even like the Matthew Tkachuk trade. Like, obviously, I don't know if the Senators have that type of firepower, but that type of trade where it's more about the players involved rather than the prospects or assets involved. And to Staios' credit, like he did that Allmark trade, and Mark Kastlick has just become a really good player. I was high on him. I didn't like him being part of that trade, but he got off Korpisalo's contract, which he wasn't that good last night, somehow only giving up $1 million per year in terms of, on the Sens salary cap. Like that's a pretty good deal, right?
Yep.
He got off Josh Norris, and, I hope Josh Norris can play a healthy season when he comes back and doesn't have injury history. But the fact of the matter is, if Josh Norris was an Ottawa Senator, he would have played 2 games this year. And where would this team be compared to Dylan Cousins, who's, hasn't been perfect, but he has 8 goals, 14, 15 points. Like he's been a valuable player for this team, despite his warts. So yeah, at the same time, the Jensen trade, I think, worked for the most part. The Allmark contract's going to be interesting. Right now, it's not aging well at all. And I think you're pretty worried about year 3, 4, maybe even year 2, even year 1, right? Zetterlund has been a failure so far. Maybe he turns it around as he played last night. But yeah, I think you're completely right. Like he has the core now for the next couple of years. what do you do around it? How do you make this team not just good, a really good team, but a great team? And I don't know what the answer is, but it's up to Steve Staios to try and make it happen.
Do you think they're going to get their first round pick back this year?
I maybe you can tell me if I'm irrational. I think they're going to get it back like the Devils got back their first round pick for the Kovalchuk contract, which is like you get the 32nd overall pick and you cannot trade it. If you told me, like, you know, if Betway had something and I had to bet my money on it, like just mandatory, that would be what I would do. I would bet that option. That's my inclination. What about you?
See, so like I'm kind of like tepidly optimistic because obviously it happened under like previous regime, previous general manager, the league underplayed
Owner.
it. But previous owner, and they underplayed it during the sale, right? Like they underplayed it to Andlauer during the sale process, and it was just kind of swept under the rug. Like, don't worry about it, everything's gonna be fine. But I also like Gary Bettman also sticks to his guns a lot. And I don't know, they don't seem too optimistic right now. I know like Staios doesn't, but like he always keeps his cards close to his chest, so you never know with him. But Andlauer seems a little bit more open to talk about it. But I find like the interesting wrinkle, I've talked to you about this like several times, is like the league developed its own internal app to distribute to all the NHL teams that have every player's contract structure, the status of their contract, no trade clauses, money involved, everything, and that all gets rolled out after this. So it's like there were no internal mechanisms in place other than like asking GMs to like do their due diligence, know the roster in and out, know all the contracts they've awarded. It takes some of the guesswork out for other teams. Like they can actually just look and say, oh, okay, this is what the player has. He has a 10-team modified no trade list. This player has a full no trade list. It takes that kind of like level of responsibility out of it, because as we've seen, some general managers can just be ignorant, negligent
or incompetent.
Incompetent. Call it what you want. Call it what you want.
I think the Pierre Dorion trade machine fiasco could be like a 30 for 30 ESPN. Like you could probably write a book about that. Just hearing things from behind the scenes, shall we say. Interesting. Just the Pierre Dorion era. What a time. We're a team. But I do feel like they're going to get it, but like last minute. Like that's why I'm not that worried that there hasn't been an announcement, because I'm pretty sure that's what happened with the Devils. It was like a week before the draft. It's like, oh, you have your pick back. So for me, it's like if we're 3 days before the draft and they still don't have their pick, then I'm going to be like, oh, I don't think, like, to me, I don't think there's going to be an announcement on January 2nd being like the Senators now have their pick. It's the 32nd pick, right?
I can see it coming during the postseason or after the trade deadline when it's like, it's not consequential.
Maybe. I still feel it'll be like a May-June thing. Maybe this almost like when the Sens get eliminated a week later. Maybe they don't. Maybe they win the cup. Who knows? But when their season ends, then we have an announcement. Gary Bettman just says, "Hey, you have the 32nd pick" or something like that. I'm just so glad that I don't see people like fans. Was it the first week or two when they were at the bottom of the standings and just doing like the draft simulator, and it's like, oh, Sens lose out on Gavin McKenna. I'm like, this is not happening. Calm down. We're okay. But that was funny. I do like that to some degree.
That's a little unhealthy.
It is a little unhealthy. The one player that I feel like we should give like a lot of stick taps to is just Michael Amadio, because he's been
This is the Jason York segment of the podcast.
To plug your show. I just find he's been such a find and such a good player. And I love that contract when he signed it, just watching him a bit in Vegas. And he killed my Jets in overtime in game 3 in 2023. So I remember that goal with pain. I actually talked to Amadio about that. I'm like, do you ever like rewatch it? He's like, no, not really. It was just a cool moment. I was like, oh, fair enough. I would just have that like in the back and have it on my phone, like just like a daily reminder.
Little hype video.
Yeah. Put some overlay of some some music over it too, make it like my mixtape. But he's been such a good player, and that line, like that must be one of the best third lines in the league, eh? Like I can't.
Well, yeah. So like I was looking at the data the other day for the Pinto contract piece, and that line is like top 2, I think, in expected goals created. And I think, or sorry, no, it's top 2 in terms of expected goals for percentage. But like they're top 12 in the rate of expected goals they're supposed to be scoring. And then in terms of expected goals allowed, they're the best in the league. So when you take 3 guys who have the defensive attitude that they have, whether it's Claude Giroux, Pinto, or Amadio, and then you add like that element of offense, and you look at what they do down low, controlling the puck, controlling the cycle, just creating off that and sustaining zone time and doing all the things that they do exceptionally well. It's not a surprise. Like, and what's interesting too is like they're not the fastest guys. Like Amadio and Giroux aren't burners, and Shane Pinto he's
a good skater.
He's probably league average, I would say. Maybe that's not fair, but
maybe a
he's
bit
not
above, but he's not. Yeah,
he's not a burner, right? So they're doing a great job, and I think like the impressive part about Pinto for me is that you look at his offensive production, you're like, like for a guy who's never put up like more than 40 points, or like he's in the 30s, I think, consistently, right? I'd have to look. I think his career high might be like 30. I think it might be like 37 points or something. He's on pace for a huge
37
season.
last year. Yeah,
I think he's on pace for a career season. He's looking at like doubling it, and you're like, okay, like when you talk about like marked jumps in production like that, you're like, is this your first question to yourself? Is this sustainable? I think with his offense, I think his like 5-on-5 shooting percentage is high, but his total shooting percentage is not. It's like it's 1% more than last year's numbers, where he scored like 21 goals. So it's not outlandish production, and it gives you confidence that it is sustainable. And I think that that's one of the good parts when we were talking about his contract earlier that I just failed to allude to, but it feels sustainable. And if this is like the new Shane Pinto, and he's playing with more skilled players and offensive players who can distribute and create stuff for himself, because he's got a great shot, it bodes well. And they're doing so much good work on the defensive side of the puck. It's just they're dogging. You talk about Amadio, like we jokingly refer to him as like Mark Stone Light in the press box, right? Like he's just heavy stick, great at lifting sticks, separating the player from pucks, and he's just like he's got that cerebral acumen where he's not, again, like Mark Stone, he's not the fastest guy in the world, but he reads the game at such a high level. He knows exactly where to be, and he's constantly around the puck despite not being the fastest guy on the ice. And it's just, he's a fun player to watch. Like if you enjoyed like the subtleties of the game and like just like the one-on-one battles and just like the position, the stick lifts, stripping guys with the puck, intercepting passes and stuff, like he's a fun player to watch. If you just like, it's easy for us to say because like we can have our own isolated cameras where we're just watching a player on the ice without, like on television, just tracking where the puck goes. And he's one of my favorite guys to watch. And same with Claude. Like Claude does many of the same things, but he slows the game down. Like he's a game manager. Doesn't play fast, but I don't think he's slow either. It's just he plays the game at his own pace. He's very much a game manager.
It's almost what I love about it is you put I love like just the highly like the hockey IQ nerds and the players that just play with so cerebrally, if that's a word. And all 3 of them are some of the smartest hockey players that you have on this team and just in the league. And you put them together and they're just crushing opponents and just tilting the ice. And the fact that they're like, you talk about expected goals, they play against like all of last night, they were against David Pastrnak the whole night, right? And that line that's been unbelievable and led Boston on a 7-game winning streak. Like, it's not like they're doing this against like fourth liners or have like easy third pair. They're against the opponent's best every night. The McKinnons, the McDavids, or I guess they haven't played McKinnon, but like they're playing against the best players in the world, and they're not just shutting them down. They're scoring, right? And I just think that's like such like their stats considering are like who they play against is even more impressive. Because if they were doing that against bottom pairs or the third line of the opponent, it's like, okay, that's great. That's awesome. But they're doing that against David Pastrnak or, the Dallas Stars and Robertson, Hintz, right? Wyatt Johnson. Like it's no slouches. So it's a really good line, and I think it's going to be together I think when Kachuk backs, you keep that line unless something dramatically changes. And to Green's credit, he's very nimble in terms of, okay, I put up Nick Cousins on the first line. That worked. It was a good play for a couple games, as you mentioned. Okay, it's 2 games that hasn't really been working. Let's switch things up, right? But if it's working, he doesn't switch it up, and he's done that with that line, and rightfully so.
And I think one of the other cool parts that we don't talk about is like it's like dangling a carrot, right? So it's like you're affording guys who probably would never get that responsibility under in other situations where it's like, yeah, like Nick Cousins, not your prototypical first line player, but like if you're playing while you're battling, you're competing, you're doing a lot of like the stuff away from the puck, or you're doing a lot of the hard work, heavy lifting down low, you're going to get an opportunity. I think like we talked about Zetterlund earlier, and I think it's like his play away from the puck and his battle and compete to get the puck back when he doesn't have it is like, that was the best I've ever seen. That first period, and then second period wasn't great, but like third period, he got back to it a little bit. It's like if you can encourage players in those like depth roles, whether it's like, the third line or the fourth line, if you can get like that compete level because they see those opportunities are available to them, whether it's a game from now, 2 games from now, what have you, or when injuries occur, like that's great. Like you have to reward players. That you have to reward players. This is a psychology. It's just game management, and they're getting the most out of their guys. Like I think they're getting the most out of those guys. Like whether it's a Lars Eller and Nick Cousins, hopefully Zetterlund will be the next guy who just kind of benefits from it. But like Dave Perron's I think he's quietly put up a decent season as well. So
I'll check. Yeah, no, he's been great. And I mean, I wish he did that more for defense, if that makes sense. Like it feels like the forward utilization makes complete sense to me. Like I rarely am thinking to myself, I mean, he's a coach. He knows more hockey than I do, but sometimes you're like, oh, that's weird. Even when like Nick Cousins went on the first time, I'm like, I get the idea. It might not work, and it worked, right? So you get all the credit in the world if you're a coach if it works. When it doesn't, not so much. But outside of the Jordan Spence decision and him not being in the lineup to begin the season, I've thought Travis Green has managed this team really, really well. In combination, maybe he should have put Jensen on the third pairing a bit earlier. I get why he wanted to keep him and Shabbat together. Now they might both be out, so it'll be interesting to see what happens. Maybe we should talk about that just quickly, and then we'll wrap this up. But what do you think if Jensen's out? It sounds like Shabbat's out for a couple weeks. We'll see. Who do you call up from Belleville? Like who? Like is it Yakimchuk? I don't know if he's ready.
Well, theoretically, they're covered already on the right side, right? Like they're gonna have to call up someone for, especially before they go to California. Maybe they call up 2 guys, but they're covered on the right side as is, right? Like you have your Spence, you have your Matt and Paolo. Spence has been given opportunities in the top 4. I think one of the crappy parts about Shabby's injury is that Spence was kind of robbed of that opportunity to play top 4 with a very skilled puck mover in Shabbat. And it would have been interesting to see like how he would have fared playing those regular minutes with a guy who's entrenched in the top 4. Whereas now, like it's back to Clevin. It's like a third pairing's elevated to a second pairing just because of injury and stuff. But again, like we hit on Jensen. Like I thought Jensen's hockey against Dallas, I know he scored a goal, but like you look at the reads he was making in the neutral zone. He was jumping plays, disrupting plays with his stick. He was doing a lot of things that he did in the first half of last year before he got hurt. And it was encouraging. Like I talked to him yesterday morning about it, and like he talked about his struggles, and he talked about where his game's at now. And it's here's a guy who's he's not even like 6 months removed from surgery, and he's already playing. Like whereas like guys who have that procedure, obviously they're not all the same. Their timelines are all going to be totally different. Every player is unique in that respect. But like he's at a stage where he's playing games before many guys aren't, and that's something that he talked about. And it's like, he's still, whether you afford him time, it continually gets better. He's pain free. He's skating. He feels good. But it's just like, is this the new norm versus will he continue to get better and improve physically and get stronger with his legs and start skating a little bit better edge work, what have you. And I think that's the struggle for him, is just kind of get back to that pre-injury level. But it's
hopefully he's not hurt long term, and I don't know what the severity of the injury, but if it's not hip related, I wonder if just a couple days like not stressing out the hip might be good for him. Like if he misses a week, obviously you don't want that to happen for him, but if that's the case, just in terms of just letting the body kind of get more reacclimated to the hip and just some rest time, like it felt before that Dallas game and even the first 18 games of the season, like it really felt like, okay, he's kind of skating uphill, pun intended, right there. And I think now he might have a little bit more just time to kind of just ease the body, get some rest. He's 35. He doesn't need to play every night. And that might be good for him unless the other injury is terrible. I don't know, right? But that's one thing I just thought of.
So for me, watching him aesthetically, like obviously I've also looked at the NHL Edge data. It's lower than it was last year in terms of like what percentile he ranks in, but he's still above average in many of the skating categories, right? So it's like for me watching him play, it's more the mental decisions that he's making on the ice, the mistakes that he's making just mentally, whether it's coverage or just bad reads or what have you. And it's like that's the stuff that I think with time you can correct, because he's been a good veteran player for this team before, and I think he's a smart enough player. Just talking to him, like he knows the game, like he knows his limitations. He's very critical of his own game. Like that's one of the things that he stressed.
Yeah,
when I was talking to him, like he's his own worst critic at times, and he knows when he's not playing well. And I think there is that desire for self-improvement there. Like he's not complacent. Like he knows 100% the level that he gets, and he knows his body very well too, right? Like that guy, like he's jacked. Like he's very jacked. Like he takes care of himself. He knows how to manage his body. So I'm not like concerned. I think I'm not concerned. I'm optimistic that he's going to get to a better spot down the road. It's just how long is it going to take him to get there? And is he continually going to be put in roles, elevated up the lineup when necessarily other alternatives might be better in the short term? But I think like to Jordan Spence's credit, he's played very well when he's been in the lineup. And I think like the question mark I have, analytically, he's a darling, right? But I'm like, obviously the team doesn't like him. I shouldn't say doesn't like him, but like doesn't utilize him in certain roles because they want to insulate him. They want to insulate him on the third pairing. And LA did the same thing. Like he played 7 minutes a night in the postseason against Edmonton because they didn't want him out there against their top guys. There's a reason for that. And I think like with Spence, and one of the things that's just not publicly available is like, I would love to see like how well guys defend when the opposition gets zone time in their own offensive zone. You know, like how well do guys defend? I think that's a separator, because I think like puck movers, especially like elite puck movers, like I think Spence, like Shabby are like perfect examples. Like their analytics are always strong because when they eventually get the puck, it's going back out the other way, and then Ottawa sustains zone time because they're so efficient. They make good passes, good outlets. They create sustained zone time in the offensive zone, and that's why their numbers look great, because they generate so many chances at the offensive end when they're on the ice. So I think with Spence, I think it's like that. It's like when he's in his own end, does he defend well enough to create turnovers, to create separation off the puck with bigger opponents, and like stop those turnovers and stop those like long shifts from occurring? So I think that's the challenge. And I think it's still a league, right, where there are those archetypes. Like Jason York always preaches, like you want your big and long defensemen out there who can skate, because that's the prototypical. You look like the success of the Florida Panthers is because of guys like that. And you know, whether it's Ottawa's top four or Jordan Spence, like Ottawa's not the biggest, most physically imposing team. They have a bunch of guys who can skate well, but they're not your prototypical defensive defenseman. I think like Tyler Kleven's probably the closest thing you have to that. And he's your third pairing left defenseman. And until guys like Shabbat or Sanderson are no longer playing because of injury or trade or what have you, he's probably going to be the third pairing guy for a long time here.
I think that was a great, just eloquent explanation of the Jordan Spence dilemma and tying it into Nick Jensen. Nick Jensen, really, you can see the determination on his face when you talk to him when he wants to be better. So I'm not. And same with his reaction to that goal against Dallas, right? Puts the knee down, big fist pump. That's a guy who knows he's struggling, and that was probably like a pure moment of like cathartic bliss where it's like, okay, here we go, you know? Yeah, here we go. But I have to let you go, and we have to end the show because it is almost time for Sens practice, and we need to hop off to that, both of us. But Graeme, thanks so much for taking the time and doing this. This was a blast. We really appreciate you filling in just on a last minute basis for Pierre. Hope to do this with maybe Julian McKenzie down the line in a couple weeks. Just us three, kind of the young guys on the Sens beat, and have a little trifecta. So
you guys are young. You guys are young.
Yeah. No, you're young. You're young. But anyways, Graeme, thanks so much for taking the time and doing this. We really appreciate it, and had a blast.
Thanks, Alex. Thanks everybody for watching.
And that's a wrap. Hope you don't miss us too much until next time. Follow the Sick Podcast Sens Spotlight on YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, Google Play, and Apple Podcasts.